So, welcome to the July episode of the Sacred Wheel Speaker Series. This one is particularly fun for me because we're talking to Rhea Wolf. But if you haven't joined us before, this is a monthly speaker series where for the whole year of 2017, I am speaking to healers, visionaries, magic makers, which is all about how we can begin to create a world of beauty, peace, justice, and delight. And this month, I'm talking to my dear, dear, dear friend, Rhea Wolf, who is an astrologer, and she's going to tell us a little bit about the astrology for the second half of the year. And for those of you that kind of follow the wheel of the year, this is the dark half. So we're starting to move from solstice into the dark half of the year, which is why I invited Rhea, because you may not know this, but Rhea just got her master's degree in the dark. Rhea, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I totally want my master's to say Master of Darkness.
Yeah, Mistress of Darkness.
So I'm an astrologer based in Portland, Oregon, and I just finished my master's degree studying the spiritual concept of darkness, and also relating that to this time that we find ourselves in right now, in which it's so much clearer, perhaps, than it has been for a while. I guess we moved into a period of complacency around racism and the prevalence of white supremacy ideologies in our world. And I say we, speaking as a white person, speaking as someone with white skin privilege. So moving from the spiritual concept of darkness to look at the issue of racism in our culture as well, and in particular in pagan communities, and how pagan communities and those who identify on the spectrum within paganism, how are they working to address racism? And then more specifically, what's their current relationship with darkness in their spiritual practice and just within language? So that's been an incredible experience, getting to listen to people talk about their spiritual experience of darkness, which, as a witch, I can sometimes take for granted a little bit, in that I have cultivated a really rich relationship with darkness, and that's a really important concept for me. But it's important for us to look at, it was important for me to look at, like, how is that translating into my activism, as well as deepening my magical practice.
Yeah. So important. And I want to get to all of it. I don't know if we have time to get to all of it, but looking at the dark half of 2017, what's going to happen?
Well, a lot of astrologers over the last couple of months have been having back and forth dialogue with one another about the upcoming eclipses. And we have eclipses every 6 months. They always come in pairs. Every now and then there's a third eclipse thrown in there. But they happen every 6 months, a lunar eclipse and a solar eclipse. So why is this one so much more important, or why is this one getting a lot more buzz around it between astrologers themselves as well? And there are a couple of reasons for that. One of them is that this eclipse is actually going to be a total solar eclipse on August 21st. That's one of them. And that is going to be visible for portions in North America. And I think that that's making it generate a bit more buzz, because we haven't had one that's been particularly visible here in North America, and particularly in the United States of America, for I think it was like 93 or 94 the last time we had, and that was a partial solar eclipse too. It wasn't total. And there is some conventional wisdom around that anytime wherever the eclipse is visible, that it actually has more of an effect on those countries in particular. If it's visible from that country, then it has more effect on that country. Okay. So that's part of it. That's part of the buzz. Another reason that there's buzz around it too is that the current president of the United States, and looking at his natal chart, he is a Leo rising, and these eclipses are happening in the signs of Leo and Aquarius, and it is happening, the solar eclipse is actually happening really close to his ascendant degree. And so anytime any person has one of the eclipses on an angle of the chart, and the angles are the ascendant, which we're most familiar with, maybe talking about our rising sign. But we have 4 other points like that. There's the ascendant, which is the rising sign. There's the midheaven, which is the sign that was highest in the sky when you were born. There's the descendant, the sign that was setting in the west when you were born. And then there's the IC, or the nadir, the lowest point, what's hidden beneath the earth. And anytime there's an eclipse happening on one of those 4 points, you're usually getting a pretty intense activation for the year. We talk about eclipses. The term that I like to use for them is as course correctors, that if we're on the wrong course, an eclipse will come along and put us on the right course. And sometimes that can look really awesome and beautiful. And sometimes that can look really scary and terrifying because we don't want to change, or we thought we were on the right course. So eclipses in general are times of change, and amplified through the sign that they're happening in. And the signs that they're happening in August would be Leo and Aquarius. And again, really affecting the current leader of the United States of America. And so that's one of the reasons it's getting buzz. Another reason is that Mars, the planet of aggression, power, vitality, it's kind of the roar of the chart. It's kind of the energy of the chart. And as I say this, a loud motorcycle is going by on the street in front of my house. That's Mars, right? It's like hyper masculinity could be one way of thinking about it. It's testosterone. It's like
it's the crotch rocket.
Yeah, let's go, right? So Mars is sitting at both eclipses, is sitting on the sun at both eclipses in the sign of Leo. On August 7th, we have a full moon in Aquarius, so that's a lunar eclipse. Mars is conjunct the sun, pretty closely conjunct the sun for that one. On August 21st, we have the new moon solar eclipse in Leo. Mars is going to be sitting within a few degrees of that eclipse point as well. So anytime Mars is associated with something, the ancients would say, look out, this is going to be bad.
Okay.
And there's kind of the general consensus that the ancient astrologies, that our ancestor astrologers did not look favorably upon eclipses in the first place. They were seen as pretty ominous events, and because they were kind of like the hand of karma, or the hand of fate kind of reaching in. Right. And that kind of lack of control, I think, always gives humans a little bit of fear.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So having Mars there kind of amplifies that we don't know what's going to happen, but it's going to be fiery or violent or aggressive. That's kind of the feeling around it anytime Mars is in place. Now, we don't have to experience Mars that way. We can experience Mars as a real push of vital energy into an area of life that we need that vital energy to push into. We can think about Mars as the personal warrior within each of us. And what is it that we're here to fight for? What are we here to be the champion of? And that could be a personal cause. It can be our family. It could be our art, right? So that's what we're invited to on a personal level, to think, okay, if I'm going to be under the influence of this incredible, intense Martian energy, maybe I can channel the warrior that I'm meant to be and use that energy to kind of flow through me in that way. The eclipses are also really hooked into what is often seen as a beneficial relationship with other planets. In this case, a grand trine, which means they're making a really pretty triangle to each other. And they're all in the fire signs. The planets that it's making a grand trine to are Mars is in there again, of course, but then also Saturn and Uranus. So these are big energies that are kind of part of the portal of the eclipses, because that's kind of how I see eclipses, as portals through which magic flows through which the energy of change can flow through. And so
Right.
one of the things is that the change happens to us. We don't have any control over it. It happens. And then the other side of that is we can use this portal to actually send through intentions and generate outcomes that we hope for, that we hope
Yeah.
will happen.
Yeah. So how can we use this eclipse energy? What would you suggest as being the best way to use this eclipse energy?
Well, one of the things that I'm thinking about, because of where the eclipses are happening in Leo and Aquarius, and again, it's August 7th, full moon, that's the ripening, the height of the energy. August 21st is the new moon, and it's really that one that's seen as the potent time to set intentions. So what's the sign of Leo about then? We can think about what Leo energy is like and how can that help us harness the energy of that time to make changes in our lives. So, I'm thinking about the energy of Leo, which we often think of as very dramatic and playful. We think of the archetype or the symbol associated with it, the lion, who's the king of called the king of the jungle, but really the king of the savannah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that kind of regal nobility of the lion as well,
Yeah.
right? We picture that lion with the huge mane sitting somewhere, lounging about, but powerful, has
Mm-hmm.
power available to it if it needs it,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm thinking a lot about power, and I'm thinking a lot about how each sign we can apply that beautiful system of looking at power to the signs too. So looking at power over and power with, or power from within,
Mm-hmm.
and thinking about the Leo expressions of that in order to navigate this upcoming month and a half. I mean, we're at the beginning of July, but
Mm-hmm.
really with the new moon, we'll actually have a new moon in Leo on July 20. I'm going to look really quick at the date for that. July 23rd, we'll have a new moon in Leo at 0 degrees. That's really the beginning of eclipse season then.
Okay.
At that point. And we'll really be in the energy of that until we have the full moon in September, the full moon in Pisces in September. So what we can do is we can be thinking about the energy of power with, or power from within Leo.
Mm-hmm.
And ways that I think about power with Leo is that Leo, who's ruled by the sun, is the energy of infinite generosity and generativity. And if we think about the sun and what it gives to us here on earth, it gives us the ability to create life. That's what the sun does, right? It gives nutrients to plants, which then create the food and sustenance that they need through that light. And then we as human beings and animals, right, we can eat the plants, right? So really the sun is kind of a physical and also a poetic instrument of generosity, of generativity. And if we're really in a power with place with Leo, then we're accessing the unique creative gifts that we came in with, or that we have developed through painstaking hard work. But we're really getting in touch with that unique, beautiful, artistic, creative part of ourselves. And then we're seeing how we can use that to be in service to other people. How can we use that to encourage other people's generosity or generativity and creativity? The symbol that I like to think of often for Leo is as fixed fire, right? It's a fire sign and its modality is fixed with me, which means that it really wants to stabilize things. And I think of the symbol of the campfire or the hearth fire in one's home, right? That's fire that doesn't move, right? It's stationary and everybody wants to gather around it. You know, even today, if you're at a party, everybody ends up at the kitchen for some reason, right? I think there's something where we're looking for that warmth and that place to tell stories and to relax and share music and food. That's Leo energy, right? So the way to navigate through this next, 2 months of eclipse energy is to figure out what helps us tread lightly through life, more playfully through life, what gives us that feeling of that generativity and that that enthusiasm that we get when we're all gathered around the fire and we're like, isn't this nice? Isn't this lovely? Like, do those kinds of things that make you feel that kind of energy, that kind of warmth. And the other thing is tricky, but because we really want to stay, I'll speak for myself. I really want to stay informed, and I'm a bit of a news junkie, if truth be told.
Yeah.
And I feel it's a responsibility to stay informed, that I have to stay informed about what's going on. And yet the energy of Leo in some ways is about turning away a little bit from the villains and focusing on what is joyful and enlivening and playful, what makes you laugh, what infuses your life with that childlike spirit. And so it's almost like turning the attention towards what we want, right? And like really focusing on that generativity of joy and life in order to make the most out of this eclipse cycle. Does that make sense, Allison?
Yeah. As you were talking too, I was reminded too of that metaphor about the sun, where it's like the light and power and love, if you will, generated by the sun is not diminished by any one person taking it or using it, right?
Yes.
It is free for all, and it's limitless, right?
Yes.
So just because I put my face towards the sun and soak up some rays, it does not make there be any less sun for anybody else. And I'm thinking too about that generosity as an antidote to the sort of scarcity and like push, pull, and not enough, and just, I don't know, just that, whatever it is that's going on right now. Maybe also a bit of medicine for that.
Yeah. And I'm glad you used the word medicine, because I like to think about what is the medicine of each sign that the eclipses are going through. And Leo is heart. It's heart medicine. Leo, the new moon in Leo, which we have every year, and anytime the sun's in Leo, we're going to have a new moon in Leo. But this particular one, again, it's amplified because it also happens to be an eclipse that's happening on it. And Leo is invoking heart's desire. And the heart is the center. The heart is in, so I'm sure you can tell me more about this, but I heard once from an acupuncturist that I was getting treatment from, that the heart is like the empress of the body. Right. And so it's like that kind of energy. I think about the Empress card for that then too, and the tarot, who is like the life-giving, nurturing, nourishing energy. So to tap into our heart medicine and that center of ourselves then is to tap into that. There's enough, and it's beautiful, and I love you. Like, to focus your attention on those things in your life right now. Yeah.
There's such an interesting interplay going on in our conversation about light and dark, right? Everything we're talking about the power of the sun. There's going to be an eclipse of the sun, so the sun will be blotted out. There's the shadow side of that. There's this idea of, our heart, like the good, the heart stuff. And then there's also this idea of, which we haven't touched on, which is the underbelly, right? You said a couple things about this affecting our current president, and I'm curious about that. I don't know if we want to go into it, but I'm curious what people are saying.
I'm curious about it too. So I'll just tell you what I know. And my caveat is that I have not researched this as thoroughly as other people. So I'm taking the conversation from them, right? And translating that into my own understanding. But there is a signature. Apparently there's a historical occurrence that leaders of certain countries or movements that were born on an eclipse. And that happens to be true for the current leader of the United States.
Okay.
And if they were born on an eclipse and they become the leader of a certain country or nation or group or movement, that they tend to spell the end of that country or nation or movement or group.
Whoa.
Or a dramatic change at any rate.
Wow.
Right. And if you think about it, usually the language used is around kingship.
Yeah.
You know, and so it says that kingship has been broken.
Right.
And now a new kingship has to start.
Right. The reign.
Yeah, a new reign. And but the whole order is taken apart by that particular leader. So that's just some historical information about people born on eclipses who then become leaders. And the other thing is, because it's connected with this person's chart, with the president's chart, it usually signifies pretty dramatic change of circumstances for that person too. And so for him in particular, I don't have this right in front of me, but I do look at the Sabian symbols for the eclipses in particular, but I always look at them for the full and new moons, because it's just another way to animate the mythic imagination as we're moving through the wheel of the year and the wheel of the month, the lunar cycle. And one of the Sabian symbols for the this one's for the lunar eclipse, so the full moon lunar eclipse on August 7th, and the Sabian symbol for that eclipse is an important businessman sitting at his desk.
Interesting.
Now, these symbols were created in the 1940s by Elsie Wheeler, who channeled these symbols. So they've been around, for 70 odd years now. And that just happens to be the degree that the eclipse is happening at on that symbol. That's the symbol for it. Now, the one after that, the one that happens on the 21st with the solar eclipse new moon is something about a butterfly emerging from a chrysalis.
Oh.
So some kind of transformation has happened at that point. Now, please do not mistake my words for any sort of prediction about what would happen. I've actually given that up because I don't know that it provides what I want astrology to provide for my community, which is a feeling of empowerment and liberation for individuals. And sometimes making predictions does not do that for people. So rather than trying to guess what the outcome is, let's be with the energy and focus on how we can best serve the energy of the times that we're in.
So what I'm hearing, just to summarize, is rather than focusing on what might happen at the head of the country, for those of us that live in the US, turn our faces and our energy and our hearts towards this idea of the limitless community spirit, the love that has no quantity to it, that is absolutely infinite and is enough for all of us and can sustain all of us, and also turning our energy and our faces and our attention towards the joy. Yeah. I like that.
Yeah, it's been a real challenge for me, and it's been coming up for me as I head into this eclipse cycle. For me personally, I am a Leo, I'm a double Leo, and I've been like, what's this going to be like? And I'm like, it's all about me relearning how to do that. How to experience joy and recognize the paradox, as you were saying, that my having joy does not somehow negate other people's joy, nor is it inconsiderate of other people's suffering to experience my joy. And that's really, as somebody who feels compassion deeply and is really empathic for what's going on for others, somebody always has it worse than I have it. And so I feel as though I'm not entitled to feel joy because I need to stay with their suffering. So I'm really in the baby steps of my own journey of rediscovering joy right now, which is what this eclipse cycle is about. And for people who are listening to this too, if you know your natal chart, you can look and see where Leo, the signs of Leo and Aquarius are in your chart. If you have planets there, the houses that hold those signs, that can give you more information about how to work with this energy. But any of us can just ask ourselves, spend some time considering the hidden talents, the abilities that we have that we haven't acknowledged and that we need to acknowledge. That's exactly what the world needs right now, are those talents and those abilities. And maybe even thinking about the ways that we want to take on more leadership roles in our communities, in our families, in the larger world. to think about the ways that we give and receive love, right?
Yeah.
Because again, Leo being the heart, how do we give and receive love? How do we do both?
Yeah. Yeah. How are we shining that love on other people?
Exactly.
I'm so glad you said that piece about joy, because that was going to be my next question. You know, it's so interesting because I invited you on to talk about the dark half of the year, but here we are talking about so much light.
Yeah.
And how does the darkness play into the importance of light? Or how do I better ask this question? Because I think there's a tendency within our culture, within our world specifically too, people that are spiritual seekers or whatever you want to call it, of only focusing on the light and ignoring the darkness. So how do we root that? You know, how do we both experience that joy and have that joy, but keep it rooted in a acknowledgement and not ignore or turn our faces away from the darkness?
Mm-hmm. A couple of things come up for me around that question. And yes, I've seen very problematic instances in which the hierarchies of consciousness, which places the light above the darkness, I feel perpetuates supremacy ideologies, and specifically white supremacy. So how do we both allow ourselves to receive the light of the sun and also be in a deep and beautiful relationship with the darkness? So two things come up for me. And one is that, first of all, the sun isn't out all the time, right? So we're in the dark half of the year, the light is waning, but we also have the dark time of the day every single day, right? And what are we supposed to do during that time of day when it's night? Rest. So if we are continually in the energy of generativity and creating and producing and experiencing joy and striving for that energy in our lives, what's going to happen? We're going to burn out. It's too much. We can't be in that state all the time. And that state actually isn't better than the other state, which is rest, which is even, I mean, we can even go there into depression, right? Which is even depression, which is even sickness or feebleness. I'm not saying that darkness has that, but there is a relationship to rest, which devalues the darkness as the time to rest as well. So what I mean to say is that in order to turn towards the light and be as creative and generative as we want to be, we have to have times of filling up as well, and filling up with a nurturing darkness, filling up with times for rest, for reflection. So another thing that comes up is that what does the sun do besides generate life? It also generates shadow, right? So anytime you're in the sun and you're in the bright sun, which I am starting to be now, from where I'm sitting, the sun is starting to reach me. I'm also casting a shadow at this point because I'm in the sun. And so what we have to do as we turn towards the joy, this is the paradox of that as well. As we turn towards the joy and we stretch into the light, we also have to be mindful of the shadow that's being cast.
Right.
And to me, the shadow does not mean negative stuff. The shadow just means the shadow. It's whatever we're not currently looking at. And that can actually be something really important and valuable that we've forgotten about.
Right.
Or it can be something that was really painful and hard and we need to tend to. Both things could be true. And there was one other thing about that, but my brain has lost it. Shadow, light. Oh yeah, here's another thing. As we move into the dark time of the year and we think about how the interplay of light and dark, they need each other. That's the most important thing, right? It's not one or the other. They need each other, and we need both. And so looking for images and for symbols that really help us connect to a more beautiful, sacred relationship with darkness, I think is really important. And the one that I've been really working with and holding, not surprisingly, maybe as an astrologer, is the sacred night and the starry skies, and looking at how the darkness holds the light. that it's not that the darkness is the opposite of light.
Yeah.
That within the heavens, when we look at that, it is the darkness that's holding the light.
Yeah.
That's like this protective energy around it. And then guess what? I mean, I'm not a scientist or a physicist, but like that's actually what's happening, right? Mm-hmm. As the more they learn about dark matter, mm-hmm. this unseen, invisible, and yet mm-hmm. force of mass in our universe, it's holding the entire fabric of the cosmos together.
Yeah.
The darkness, that's what's doing that. It is the darkness.
Yep.
So thinking then mythically in our own lives about what that means, it means how does the darkness do that for us? How does it hold the whole thing together?
Yeah.
And we can think about that as rest. We can think about that as, I think about it as unproductive time.
Right.
And what I mean by that is in a capitalist society, which wants you to produce constantly in order to feel like you're valuable or worthwhile, doing something utterly unproductive and frivolous. And I don't mean consuming something necessarily.
Right.
But like spending time reading a book, spending time playing a game with a child.
Yeah, playing.
Yeah. Chalk drawing mm-hmm. on the ground.
Laying in a hammock.
There's no reason for that.
Yeah.
That to me is like how you're on the right track with honoring Leo energy. It's like how does Leo become a good leader? The shiny side of Leo, the power with side of Leo is leaderfulness, mm-hmm. is being really good at being a leader. And mm-hmm. how do you do that? It's by not taking yourself so seriously.
Yep.
That's the only way.
Yeah.
And if we just think about the current president and the last president, one Leo rising, that's the current president. The other was a Leo sun, the last president. Just thinking about the two different versions of Leo as leaders in that world it's interesting, right? Yep. It's interesting to look at the difference.
Yeah. Thank you. As you were talking, I was thinking about that, and we actually don't get darkness up here until about August 15th.
That's right.
That's the day that that's when people say you can finally see the auroras again.
Wow.
And that's the part of the summer. So it's falling right in the middle of that eclipse season too. Yep. So mm-hmm. darkness is even that regenerative darkness is returning up here in the polar north, the boreal regions.
Yeah. So when you aren't faced with literal darkness, then how do you give yourself that? How do you find the nurturing for that?
Yeah.
I mean, you fill up on it at the other half of the year, probably.
Yes. You have to work at it. You do. You have to work really hard at it. And that's the biggest thing up here is that people get really manic and fried. Mm-hmm. You really have to work hard at getting that regenerative rest.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for this discussion. This was lovely.
Yeah. I'm sorry that we couldn't get into more outside of the eclipses.
It's okay. I think that is a powerful, powerful thing moving forward.
So we do have some other important astrological events that are coming up in the last half of the year, including Jupiter moving signs from Libra into Scorpio.
Okay.
And then Saturn changing from Sagittarius, where it's been for the last 2.5 years, 3 years. It'll be switching into the sign of Capricorn.
And when will those be happening?
So in October is when Jupiter moves into Scorpio. So talk about an expansion of darkness. That'll be another invitation into that. And then Saturn will be moving into Capricorn on December 19th, just before midnight on December 19th. And so I guess I want to just extend the invitation because I do offer free forecasts on my website, which is rheawolf.com. And so I will be writing about those and what to expect from that and what to think about that and how to work with those energies as well. But, this next couple of months, this is the big headline, certainly working with these eclipses.
So I wanted to say for everybody, we're going to pop links. Those of you that are joining us on YouTube, I'm going to pop a link to Rhea's site below the video. And for those of you listening in on a podcast, Rhea, just give us the spelling of your name so people can find you.
Yeah, it's Rhea Wolf, RHEAWOLF. And so my website is rheawolf.com.
Okay. And if you need to, I highly recommend getting on Rhea's list because her forecasts are not only informative, but they're so beautifully written. Because one of her other talents is she is a writer. So they're not just dry, they're not just information, they are gorgeously written and so beautiful to read. So I fully recommend you doing that. And then Rhea, do you offer readings? I know you had written.
Yes.
You're still offering readings.
I'm back in the saddle after taking some time off to write my master's thesis. Yes, I am seeing clients again. Yes. And you can also make appointments from my website and find out more about my readings there.
Okay. So for those of you that are wondering what this eclipse season might mean for you, Rhea would be a really good resource for just diving into that a little further and how you and your particular chart can best move through it with grace.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Rhea.
Thank you, Allison. It's always so wonderful to get to talk with you.
Yeah. So this has been the July episode of the Sacred Wheel Speaker Series. If you are joining us on iTunes or listening to a podcast, I have a special request. If you would give me a review on iTunes, that's one way that this podcast can get rated. For those of you that are joining us on YouTube and you want to stay up to date with the next episodes coming out, you can find those at my website, which is AllisonCarr.net, and that's ALLISONCARR.net. There's a link there to sign up for the Sacred Wheel Speaker Series. So this has been the July episode of the Sacred Wheel Speaker Series, and I'm Allison Carr. Thank you so much for joining us.